My name is Jacob Larson, and this is the Common Sense Show. Last week, we had a special guest from the Black Student Union, a lady by the name of Blair Adams, and she brought her significant other guy by the name of Jordan, and we talked about racism in America and how we as a society are addressing it. As always, with topics like this, we didn't seem to have enough time. Just as we were getting into the goods of things, the hour was up, and we were at the close of the show. The one thing that I'd hoped to get across during that show was that if you think being racist is wrong, if you think that we as a society should be against racism, segregation, bigotry, etc., then we shouldn't allow it in our speech either. Now, I don't know if I effectively got that point across. We talked about a lot of things relating to it, and I do believe we have come a long way in the process of abolishing racism in the country. However, I think that being mindful of our speech and mindful of our titles, etc., is the next step, and it's important. How we refer to race-related issues in the media is important. The words we use in our speech serve as an extension of how we think. There's a saying that goes, change the way you think, to change the way you speak, to change your actions, to develop effort, to get results. And that is the point I'm trying to make. If you're against racism, you think racist is wrong, then you need to consider how you refer to each other. You need to think about what you call your organizations, how you refer to people in your songs, how you tell or describe things about one another. Don't fall into the trap of inciting race or perpetuating racism by using words that you use. And if that doesn't make any sense to you, if for some reason you struggle to grasp that concept, even though it's a pretty basic concept, then you suffer from a mental disorder. And for Jordan's sake, our guest on the show last week, you are stupid. Stupid. Because you have heard the truth, you're privy to the truth, and yet you have failed to acknowledge it. And I mean that in the nicest way possible.
All right. Okay.
So we have today we may, I don't know for sure, Darren, we may have a special guest, guy by the name of Mark. It'll be a little bit different. Mark, he's not actually here. He's out of town. He's supposed to be calling in at a specific time. I've never done an over-the-phone interview like this before, so I don't even know if it's going to work out or if it's going to happen at all. But I hope it works. I mean, this guy is from law enforcement. He works in law enforcement, and the topic today is in regards to that. Now, the hardest thing, for whatever reason, I've brought this topic up to numerous people in law enforcement, and for whatever reason, they'd love to talk about it, but they're worried about losing their jobs. So I've talked to about 5 different officers, none of which have been able or willing to be on the show because they're worried about the backlash of what they have to say. And I always tell them, I encourage them, I let them know, listen, nobody listens to this show. I mean, it's just you and me talking. It's private. No one's going to hear a word we say. You can say whatever, but that doesn't seem to sway them. So anyway, but that's kind of along those lines. Now, you had told me prior to the show that you were going to take me to task on a few things. I was going to take you to task
on a few things that we talked about last week. And also, I wanted to pretty much say the same thing that you did as far as the guest that you had last week. She was awesome.
Oh, they were great.
Yeah. I just thought we would have had, 3 hours to go.
Yeah, we ran out of time.
Yeah, we really didn't cover what we needed to. However, all right.
So what's your gig?
Okay,
what's your problem with last week's
my
show?
thing that I got thinking about after the show was over is, okay, you don't like us mentioning race in any way in our general speak, okay?
Yeah, I think that I mean, if it's a law enforcement thing where you have committed a crime and we are trying to hunt you down or find you, then absolutely we need to give every single descriptor as possible.
Okay, but just, you and me and...
you and me just talking, and we're just talking about different things, and we're just going to tell straight... No, I don't think so.
So it's not right for me to talk about, my friend Jim, he's a black guy.
Yeah.
You find that wrong.
Exactly. Your friend Jim is still your friend Jim, regardless of whether or not, regardless of the color of his skin.
All right. Now, the point I wanted to make is, did you grow up here? I mean, grew up in Oregon.
I was born in Washington. I was raised in Oregon. yeah.
Okay, all right. So, Eugene, I mean, the state of Oregon, state of Washington, is not the most diverse place in the United States.
Depends
okay?
on where you go.
I mean, for the most part, we're a fairly white, part of the nation.
Sure.
Okay. All right.
You
Now-
want to say personally, like I said, it depends really on where you go. I mean,
Right.
there are absolutely more diverse neighborhoods depending on where you're at.
Okay.
In the state of Washington and in the state of Oregon. But yeah, let's for general speaking terms, sure, we can. Say
Okay,
it's more.
so I get your point about you think that we shouldn't be referring to people with such descriptors, just in general speak. However, let's say if you and I grew up, say in Chicago or D.C. or Atlanta, where there is a more diverse mix of people, I would think that that kind of descriptor is probably more common and probably
Why?
more
I mean,
expected.
okay, they're going to refer. You're talking about Chicago or Atlanta or some places like that where there's more culturally diverse or black
Yeah.
community type of thing.
Sure.
You're going to sit there and tell me that in those communities they're going to refer to each other as black?
I think there's going to be.
I mean, shouldn't it be the other way around? Wouldn't they be referring to us as white, and they wouldn't
Yes,
refer to them as anything?
and I think it goes both ways on that.
But they wouldn't refer to themselves as anything.
Sure, they would.
We don't refer to each other as white.
I mean, come on.
I don't
Like,
introduce you as Theron, my white friend.
No, but you'll hear people, from predominantly black communities that, like when they call into radio shows or something, and they will say something to the effect of, "Well, as a black man, I believe." this,"
Exactly.
or-
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
I'm saying I think we've been brainwashed as a whole, as a society, to use those descriptors.
Now,
and
myself,
I
I don't
need
think
to.
that's such a bad deal. And
Why is it not a bad deal?
Okay, all right. For example, now you've been to India. Now,
Sure, but once again, Theron, you don't refer to yourself as white. Do you say I'm a white male?
no, you're right. I don't.
Okay, but why?
Okay, but
Because you can go back to what they were saying because they automatically assume that you come from a white society, so it's just a given.
right.
I mean, you could make that argument too.
yeah.
But you brought up the fact that here we are in Atlanta, Georgia, whatever, in these predominantly black neighborhoods, and they still refer to themselves as black.
Does it bother you at all if somebody refers to you as white, or like if you were in India and you had a friend there that said, "Oh yeah, that white guy, that's my friend Jacob."
I always question the premise on why they brought it up. It's like why are you stating the color of my skin? Why are you stating my race? What does my race have to do with whatever we're doing?
Yeah.
Okay, and you can call me cracker or whatever. I mean, it's the same type of deal. It's like, why are you making that? Why are you making that statement? Why are you saying?
I just don't see it as offensive. For me, it's just a descriptor. It's kind of like the way, and I brought up the point last week. If somebody has one arm or is missing an eye or is bald or something of that
You
nature.
don't see it as offensive, but once again, there are some people out there that, I mean, you say that if you were to call them black, that's offensive because it's got to be African American.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, some people prefer to be called black than African.
Exactly.
And back in the 70s,
what
we
I'm
were
saying?
calling people Afro-American, and that
Right.
was out.
and Negro and stuff like that.
Sure.
My point is this: why are those descriptors even used? They're unnecessary. They're irrelevant. They don't add or subtract anything from the
Well, I guess it depends on the situation.
law enforcement. That's the only thing I can think of, where it actually applies. Outside of that, I mean, you have to look at it this way. If you believe that people who are racist are ignorant to the truth, then, and it's a flawed thought process, flawed mentality to think or believe, that one race is higher or lower than the other, or is better than the other.
Now, I can see
That
racism
concept
as
is-
speaking disparagingly of another person. Then I would see that as racism. But just using it as a descriptor, I don't see that so much as racism.
I see it's connected.
Really?
It's connected.
Okay.
Yeah, once again, it's extension of how you think.
Okay.
It's extension of how you think. Somewhere in your mind, you have segregated people
Yeah.
and then you're voicing that.
And, like when I've been in other countries, where people would refer to me as white, never bothered me a bit. I mean, yeah, I'm
No.
white. I don't have
No.
any problem with that. And I don't have any problem with somebody referring to me as white or, as a descriptor.
Yeah.
That doesn't bother me a bit.
Even though you're not really white, you're kind of a cream-colored dude.
Well, whatever.
I mean, it's not even specific. I just think that, like I said, I think it goes a little bit above and beyond. I don't necessarily. There have been some people. I can't even explain myself right. I mean, there have been some people that have actually made the argument that we don't actually experience racism now.
Well, I disagree with that.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. I mean, there are some people that will make the argument that racism, as we've seen on TV back in the 50s and stuff like that, it doesn't exist like that anymore.
Right.
And that real, true racism, things that actually go down, you got to drink from this drinking fountain, I get to drink
Sure.
from this one.
Sure.
It doesn't
We've
happen
definitely come a long way.
Yeah, and I think we have. I just think we need to take it a step further. And the step further being, we need to quit segregating people in our brains.
Like I said, I don't see that as really being the case, because if I refer to my friend Jim as a black person, that doesn't make me inherently racist.
You're segregating. I mean, absolutely.
Well, it's a descriptor. It's just like my friend
Does
that
the
bald guy
descrip-
over there,
the-
Mark.
Does the
what I mean?
descriptor apply? Does it apply to the conversation or circumstance in which it's being used? That is the question.
Okay.
If it doesn't, then you got no business using it.
All right, fair enough.
That's
Fair
just
enough.
what I think.
Okay.
I
All
mean,
right.
I mean,
and
to
I
me-
can't help but wonder if we were in a more diverse area of the nation, such as Chicago or whatnot, it would be more acceptable as a descriptor.
I don't think
Because
it's
you've
just-
got more of an equal number of different races.
For what basis?
Just as a
For
descriptor.
what basis?
You know.
I'm going to bring my friend Jim along me to watch the movie
Right.
or the baseball game or whatever. Well, I ain't never going to a baseball game. But I mean, you understand what I'm saying.
Sure.
Okay. Under that circumstance, that statement, it doesn't matter what Jim is.
Oh, I totally agree.
I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, Jim could be, an alien from, Mars or something.
All right.
Painted
All right.
green.
I just wanted to clear that up.
Yeah,
All
I mean,
right.
I just think I think that if the concept itself is an ignorant thing, it's not an educated people. People in the past have said, people who are racist are uneducated. I mean, that's what people have said. They say, listen, you're an uneducated person if you're racist or you believe in racism, that type of thing. I think if you're going to make that statement, then you should recognize the absurdity of race.
Yeah.
Because it is absurd. It is an absolute absurd concept. You got to understand that. I mean, so I was raised in Oregon, but my family was never raised at all in any way, shape, or form where racism was okay on any level.
Right.
It just wasn't. I mean, we had, I can remember my grandmother telling me stories about how my cousins was actually killed during the 50s because him and his black friend were going into a restaurant or a type of establishment, and blacks weren't allowed, and they got into a fight, and my cousin got killed over
Wow.
that. And so my family has always been adamantly opposed to racism and stuff like that.
Sure.
My grandpa, one of my great grandpas, he worked with inner city kids for nearly a year, trying to help them get them out of different circumstances and situations that they were in, and totally opposed to racism and stuff like that. I mean, it's something that in my family it was never something that was allowed on any level.
Yeah.
I mean, it just wasn't. And
Yeah. So there's definitely more consciousness within your
Well,
within your own family because of that.
because we've
circumstance.
experienced a lot of stuff like that, and it's like so I see some of the responses from people. I look at read different articles, I've watched different things, and it's like I really don't understand why people, and I mean especially from the media standpoint. I mean, you want to talk about total hypocrites. I mean, you got these media outlets out there that will sit there and go on and on about well, primarily from, you want to talk a political side, be primarily from a liberal side, liberal Democrat side. They go on and on about how, they're against race and all this other stuff, but they're the very first to throw it up there. They're the very first to quote unquote do race baiting, say, oh, well, it's all due to race. It's all regard to race. I mean, the whole Obama being elected as president, I mean, they made a big issue, as if the Republican Party had a big issue with the color of the man's skin. Had absolutely nothing to do with that. Right. I mean, absolutely nothing to do with that. I mean, the guy's policies are completely, totally off the charts, whacked. But yet, if you sit there from the liberal Democrat side and you keep spouting, well, that's racist, that's racist, that's racist, that's racist, pretty soon everybody's just looking at, well, hey, maybe you've got some racist issues there. And it's like, you know what, we're not even talking about the actual policies that Obama's trying to implement. We're not actually talking about any of the real issues that are going on. Now we're seeing this fictitious ghost of racism that does not exist in the Republican Party. Right. And yet that's what everybody's looking at. And it's just it's a disgrace. It's a joke. Okay. You want to talk about getting pissed off, frustrated, and angry. That right there pisses me off. That's one of the main reasons why I've talked more about race and race issues in the last 3-4 years than I ever have. And it's primarily because you got all these people running around, pointing fingers going, hey, if you disagree with what Obama says, some of the things he's done, that makes you a racist. Simply because of the guy's skin. And it's ridiculous. Right. I mean, now he's got elected to he's got a second term, which I knew he was going to have. Okay. And everybody's on the Obama bandwagon. Yay, let's give him a second term. Let's just give him a chance. Well, now he's doing the full action, trying to pull everybody's guns, and everybody's in a panic.
And you know what? I don't think that's going to happen because it's not going to get through the House and Senate, and he's going to have.
But Theron, that makes you a racist.
No,
because you disagree.
Doesn't.
Sure, if you disagree with Obama, you're a racist.
No,
you can't sit in here and have the argument about gun control. It's got to be about Obama's race.
I think as far as gun control. It's not so much, the problem that we have in society is not the guns, it's the mental state of the people using the guns. And that's really what needs to be addressed.
I'm not going to let you talk about any of that. I'm just going to call it racist. Okay. I'm just going to say it's racist because that's all anybody ever does.
All right. Well, you have a new topic today, and I'm really anxious to hear what you have to say about this because I have a feeling I'm going to be in opposition with you on this one as well a little bit.
Okay, now I just want to clarify. That's it. That was you taking me to task. This
is
what you were going on
I just
about?
wanted to
you
clarify.
Send me a text prior to the show. Say I'm going to take you to task. That was it. That was the rebuttal.
Yeah, I mean, I think if upbringing was a little
buddy,
different,
that is weak.
Sorry,
that is weak, my friend.
But no, I was just wanting to get some clarity on that. Because, like I said, I don't think that the descriptor is a problem. I don't think that is at all racist.
It's you know what, like I said.
But, I mean, you seem to think that it is racist. I don't believe it is.
It stems from a deep-seated racism in you by segregating it in your brain.
Totally disagree.
It does. It totally does. That's what I'm saying.
All right.
Total racist commie bastard. Oh, I didn't say that. Because that's illegal.
Ouch.
Okay, so so the topic for today, the thing that I'm interested in, like I said, I have asked for I have looked for probably a good month and a half for an officer, somebody who works in law enforcement, to come on this show and talk about this topic. Now, when I've talked to them privately, they're all like gung-ho, oh yeah, definitely got all sorts of input. Then I say, listen, I want to bring you on the show. I want to put a mic in front of your face. And I want you to talk about this stuff. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, I mean, you can almost see it in their eyes. The dots start being connected. And they go, wait a minute. I'm going to give my name. I'm going to give my occupation. I'm going to say where I work. And then I'm going to get public backlash. And I'm going to have people upset, pissed off, frustrated, angry with me. And I'm going to lose my job. That's what they're worried about. Right. I mean, it all comes down to I'm going to lose my job. So I don't have the stones. I lack the cojones to come on this show and tell Jake what I think. That's what it is. That's what it is. I have offered to.
They want to keep their job. I can
hey, you know what? That's all fine and dandy. But I've offered to do it anonymous. I've offered to have you scramble their voice so it sounds all fuzzy when they're talking. You know, and I know you can do that. I mean, I've offered all these things as a way to come on the show.
Right.
And simply give me the goods. Tell me the truth. These guys are in the trenches. Now, make no mistake. I have the most utmost respect for people who work in law enforcement. Well, I want to be more specific. For people who are police officers. Okay? The duckies, the pencil pushers, not so much. But the police are the ones that work the streets, by far have the worst jobs on the planet.
I totally agree with that.
They suck. It sucks. They work with the dregs of humanity.
Exactly.
And I mean, they wake up every single day, and they get to think about, gee, I wonder if I get to go deal with, so and so, and I wonder if he's gonna, stick me with a needle or pull a gun on me.
Stay sane over a period of 25, 30 years, whatever.
Yeah, imagine if you get in an argument with your lady, okay, and you're screaming and yelling at each other, and things all turn bad, and she's hitting on you and blah, 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 and it's a big issue. I mean, that's like one circumstance or situation that you got to deal with. These cops, they got to deal with that stuff every day.
Every day.
They get to deal with the crappiest moments in people's lives every single day, and that sucks. And I'm not a big fan of, getting a ticket, but traffic cops, I mean, they deal with the same crap.
Sure they do.
So
Sure they do.
Anyway, so I have the most respect for officers. I really do. I think their jobs, toughest jobs. I don't know. I've got friends that are that are police officers. They like the jobs. I have no idea how they could like that job. But seriously, I have friends that think it's the greatest thing on the planet. But yeah, for whatever reason, they can go every single day and face dealing with other people and guns and stuff like that. But they don't have the stones to come on the show, even on an anonymous level. And I think that's a joke. I mean, there's some friends of mine in particular that are good friends of mine that I've known since high school that lack the stones to come on the show. I mean, they literally don't have the cojones. And I would love to name names right now because I would be more specific, but I can't. But I mean, they just won't come on the show. So the bottom line is, I would like to talk about. Man, are you listening to me?
I'm listening. I'm getting the commercials.
I realize you got to work with stuff, and that's fine. But I mean, they have. I would like to talk about sterilization. Okay. And sterilization. Now let me
Yeah,
clarify.
no, go for it. Go for it.
Okay.
Make your
Before
case.
you get all
Make your case.
Sterilization in terms of law enforcement. Okay, so somebody has committed a crime. We're not talking about eugenetics and stuff like that. We're talking about somebody has committed a crime, and as part of their sentencing, sterilization's a part of it. And I'm talking about specific crimes. Now I want to
sex offenders.
I posted. That's one thing. I posted a thing on Facebook along these. I recently posted an article that read that Florida teachers were among 50 that had been arrested for child sex crimes. When it comes to the sentencing of repeat offenders of child sex crimes, child abuse, or drug users who have been convicted multiple times and have had children taken away, would it be wrong for us as a society to demand the use of sterilization as included in their sentencing? Meaning that, in addition to jail time, removal of their kids from their homes, or whatever the sentencing is, they will also be taken in and given a hysterectomy, a vasectomy, whatever, so that they are no longer allowed to reproduce.
Vasectomy is not going to change anything. They're going to have to literally...
You finish.
All right.
Okay, because this is what I'm saying. I put on my Facebook.
All right.
I pose this as a question.
Right.
So they're no longer allowed to reproduce. Is that inhumane, or is that a good way to protect our kids? I'm leaning on the concept that some things, such as crimes against children, are mental disorders and need to be genetically stopped. What do you think? Now, I had a couple responses. Let me read the responses before you get all excited.
I'm calm. I'm good.
You're calm.
All right.
A guy by the name of Tobin, he says, clean up the gene pool, ? Good question. Now, how do we get it past the liberals? The bleeding heart liberals, such as yourself, sitting across from me.
Oh, come on.
Okay, this woman, Tracy, she put the word repeat when it comes to child sex crimes shouldn't even be. Burn them alive. Period.
I understand the sentiment completely.
I was going to say, the vast majority of the people who posted on that thread were all kind of along the same lines with Tracy. I mean, they're all like, you know what? stone them, kill them, get rid of them, be done with them, whatever. And then our favorite, Lita Sellers,
Nice.
she posted, she said, I can certainly understand the passion regarding this topic, but I think these are Band-Aid type fixes. All of the above actions, whether it be dependency, child molestation, murder, any form of harm to an adult or child, comes from some deviation of the brain. Alcoholics, for instance, are missing a piece of the link to the body pleasure center, and the alcohol, in effect, acts as a splice to reenact the dopamine in our brain. My point being that while physical mutilation seems attractive to some, a pecorectomy, I think she coined that phrase, pecorectomy. You gotta love that lady.
Man.
She comes up with some awesome stuff.
Lita's awesome.
Doesn't necessarily solve the problem. Very few, if any, sexual predators can be rehabilitated. So the only answer is lobotomy. Pinpoint the missing or malfunctioning part of the brain and neutralize it. I don't believe we have enough information about the offspring of offenders to automatically and arbitrarily take away their reproductive rights. This should be looked at more carefully. What I find most interesting about this post is how quickly everyone here who wants less government interference would trust any kind of government with such a project. What do you think?
I think we're going to go to a break. And then when we come back, then we're really going to get into it. And if you want to get into it, the listener, give us a call right here, 541-284-7953. We're going to be back in 2 minutes. You're listening to the Common Sense Show.
And we are back. Jacob Larson, Theron, here at the station with the Common Sense Show, talking about sterilization, after I convinced Theron to agree with me on the race issue. Once again, if you'd like to call into the show, have any questions for me or Theron, call in at 541-284-7953. Once again, that number is 541-284-7953. Give us a call and let Theron know that you agree with me. So, sterilization. What do you think?
You know, I haven't heard my point of view yet.
And I don't know if anybody wants to, Theron, because you need to just agree with me.
Well, that wouldn't be any fun at all. Now,
I haven't actually, said what my position is.
all
I
right.
simply posed the question. But what do you think?
So when you brought this topic to my attention last week, you were saying that for repeat offenders that it should be mandatory.
Repeat offenders, but more specifically, crimes that involve children.
Okay.
I think that crimes that involve children is the key. I mean, we're talking about, and I don't care what it is, domestic dispute, drugs, theft, anything like that. If it involves children, then...
Okay, well, you do know that we have Measure 11, mandatory minimum sentencing, right? So if somebody is convicted of a sex crime against a minor, it is a 8-year sentence, okay? So... And then I'm not sure what happens if they're a repeat offender, if it's another 8 years, or if it's longer, or what have you. But they're going away for a long time. There's no early parole. They're in there, okay. And so if we're going to get into the business of castration, who is going to pay for it?
I didn't say castration.
What?
I said sterilization.
Well,
I'm not talking about removal of
you're not.
nut sackages.
Okay. All right.
Sacagewea.
Yeah.
Well, Lita called it what? Peckerization or peckerotomy? I'm not referring to that.
Okay. Oh, you're not. Well, then
I'm talking about
what?
sterilization.
Sterilization. Well, if you sterilize somebody, it still works, right?
They can no longer reproduce.
They cannot reproduce.
Right.
Right.
That's the key.
But if their crime is crimes against children, then that's not going to matter anyway, right? It's the fact that their equipment works.
Okay, but what I'm saying is you have people who are committing these crimes, and I'm kind of leaning more along the lines of what Lita had said here. This is mental disorder.
We are 1320 AM.
Whoops.
Yeah, this is mental disorder time that goes on here.
Yeah.
Where people don't have things, the synapses isn't happening in their brain. They've crossed to the other side of crazy.
Yeah.
And so I'm talking about it for two reasons. Number one, to serve as a deterrent, letting people know that, listen, if you abuse your kids, if we have to come in and remove the kids, for the safety of the kids, then yeah, this is something that could take place. We could also remove your right to reproduce. So you will no longer.
And who's paying for that?
You'll no longer.
The taxpayers are,
you'll
right?
no longer be. Listen, the taxpayers are paying more for it now anyway. I'm saying this is a way that they said it work as a deterrent. And number two, stop the gene.
All right, how would it be a deterrent? For example, let's say you've got somebody who wants to molest children. All right, that ability to reproduce isn't going to do any good because they're not interested in reproducing anyway. They're interested in causing great harm to young people.
It could have a really big deal to do with it, especially if they're doing it to their own children.
Well, okay, sure,
yeah, and that's what I'm talking about.
But sterilizing them isn't going to do anything really because
if
their
we're
equipment.
Listen, we have there have been circumstances, Darren, where people have done these crimes. They committed these crimes against kids.
Right.
Their kids are removed. They're taken out of the home. Mm. They go to jail. They serve their time. They get out. They're still not. The kids have not been returned because they're not allowed to come back to the home because whoever it is still on probation or something. While they're out serving probation, they get pregnant again. And and then the moment that they go back to jail, the moment the baby's born, the state takes the baby.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems crazy. It's complete and utter lunacy. It's like, you know what? If this person has proven that they're an unfit mother or an unfit father, that they shouldn't be around children, then they simply shouldn't have the ability to reproduce.
Yeah.
That right should be taken away from them. And you can make the argument that Lita made in terms of, what kind of government affairs. Listen, if somebody is committing a crime, they have given up their rights. In my opinion, I know that in court of law they haven't. They still have rights. But my thing is like, listen, if you've crossed that line, you're basically saying, hey, I'm going to become a ward of the state, and the state's going to determine where I eat, where I sleep, and what I do. And it's no different than joining the military. I mean, you give up your rights. Somebody else controls what you do. And that's the way it works. So as part of sentencing, I don't see anything wrong with simply saying, hey, if we have to remove your kids, and I'm talking about, once again, repeat offenders, people that are heavily into drugs, drug users and strung out, and you got these babies that are taken out of the home because they've been deemed unfit parents. Those people should not be allowed to reproduce. And you can make the argument, where it's like, well, what if 10 years from now they turn their life around, they stop using drugs? Great. Then that can be a story that they can tell other people that, hey, you don't want to go down this road because there's some things you don't get back.
Right. I still think I would probably have to agree with Lita that you address the mental health issue, not. I don't think the state, which the operation or whatever is done, is paid for by the taxpayer. I think we should address the mental health issue because obviously there's.
I agree.
Yeah.
It needs to be addressed. But mental health issue is not as cut and dried as saying, gee, it's a mental health issue. Mental health issues are very complex and complicated things.
Agreed.
You can't just go in and snap a finger and fix it.
Right.
If that was the case, we wouldn't have any more liberals. Because that had been done a long time ago. Did you like how I tied that in?
Not really.
That was pretty awesome. Because, liberalism is a mental disorder. Get it?
You think?
Yeah. So, I mean, the bottom line is, it's not that simplistic. It is a complicated thing. In the meantime, while we're trying to figure out, how to fix that, why can't we simply say, you're no longer going to be allowed to perpetuate the same things you've been doing with future kids? We're no longer going to take that gene pool that obviously has some mental synapses firing improperly. We're going to take that out of the equation, and we're no longer going to deal with that anymore.
I still have to disagree with any form of sterilization if it's like, for example, drugs, all right? Because you deal with the disease. You deal with the mental issues of drug addiction.
If the drugs involve kids?
Sterilizing is not going to change anything.
It's going to prevent it from happening to future kids.
If
it's their kids.
Okay, point taken.
Yeah, I mean, if it's, listen, there are people out there that literally, they've got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 kids.
Right.
I mean, and they have these things that are going on in their life because they can't get it together, can't keep it together, and their kids are suffering from it. I'm just saying, under those circumstances, if it's a repeat, listen, if it's a one-time gig, you get popped doing something, I understand everybody makes mistakes, rehabilitate, whatever. You get somebody who's doing it on a routine basis. This is habitual.
Now, I'm all for longer sentences and more rehabilitation, what have you.
I'm just saying,
but I totally disagree with having the state be in the business of sterilizing prisoners.
I have news articles.
Okay.
Judges
bring them on.
Judges have done this.
What do you got?
This was an article in the New York Times, published a few years back, January 31st, 1993. It's entitled "Woman Who Molested Sons Agrees to Sterilization." It goes on, says a woman who was convicted of molesting her sons has agreed to be sterilized to avoid prison, and the judge who gave her the choice has now come under criticism. The problem is not having more kids, said one critic. State Representative Lois DeBerry of Memphis, an advocate for women's issues, it is protecting the kids she has. So she's making the same argument you are, buddy. To protect the children's identity, the names of the 26-year-old woman and her 33-year-old husband, both of whom were convicted of molesting the women's two sons, were not released. The State Department of Human Resources is seeking permanent custody of the child's five children, according to court documents, which also say that the woman comes from a very incestuous family. The woman gave birth to her fifth child last week. Now, if she's been doing this to the other kids, what do you think is going to happen to the fifth one?
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Sure.
Okay. The husband and wife were sentenced to 10 years in prison on January 15th for molesting the boys, but Judge Lynn Brown of Criminal Court said he would give them probation if the woman consented to having a tubal ligation, in which the fallopian tubes are cut or sealed so that eggs and sperm cannot meet. The judge's offer did not require her husband to be sterilized. Now, I take issue with that because I think they should have both been done. Let's see here. Judge Brown said the orders by the other judge for sterilization of women had been reversed on appeal, but this case was different. He said if it had just been a matter of an indigent, I don't know how to say that, man. I'm a moron.
I can't say it.
Indigent woman, whatever that is, having a bunch of kids, I wouldn't have ordered it. He said, it's abundantly clear to me that if she has any more children, it is very likely that they would be victimized. And see, that's my point. Civil libertarians and women's group have criticized the decision on two grounds. First, it's a clear-cut gender discrimination. I would agree with them on that. Okay. The guy should have been sterilized too. The executive director of American Civil Liberties in Tennessee said the second court-ordered sterilization is unacceptable, even if it had been offered as an option to both of them. So she's taking issue with the sterilization in general. Goes on to say these kinds of conditions should be clearly illegal since the Supreme Court in 1942 struck down forced sterilization of repeat offenders, stating that procreation is one of the basic civil rights of man. Mrs. Paltrow said, and while problems involving child abuse or molestation are extremely serious, they're not caused by someone's ability to reproduce.
And I kind of agree with that.
Okay, but once again, she's been busted for molestation,
right.
Just popped out her fifth child.
Right. I think she needs to be
sterilized. No longer allowed to reproduce.
I think she needs to be put in a position where that cannot happen. Whether it's longer prison sentences or halfway houses or, some kind of inpatient deal where she's not able to have that kind of situation happen.
Okay. Did you read the part where I said, the vast, it says right here, Tracy Abbott, she says the word repeat when it comes to child sex crimes shouldn't even be burn them alive. The vast majority of the people who responded on that thread when I posed that question were saying the same thing.
No, I totally understand the sentiment.
Okay, they're all for listen.
Yeah.
Take it out. Be done with it.
I say take the people out of society that are causing these
for
problems.
How long? I mean, your idea is a lot more expensive than mine, Theron. I mean, it's a lot more expensive. I mean, some of these, especially when you're talking about repeat sex offenders and stuff like that. I mean, it really is. I mean, there is a mental disorder that's going on there,
right?
And it is, and it has to do with their biological genetic makeup. Something's going on. Something's not firing right.
Right.
And so really, do you want those genetics passed on? Do you want to continue?
No, obviously I don't.
Okay, and I'm not sitting here and saying, eugenics where, somebody's going to sit there. That was another thing. It's like, well, who decides how this happens? Well, the perpetrator does.
All right.
The criminal who does the repeat offense does. I mean, you're simply putting it into one of the, you're simply including it in the, the judgment of whatever the crime was.
Okay.
That's all it is.
I don't see it really as being a deterrent, because the person that has, let's say that they've been sterilized, all right? It could make them a more violent person. It could make them a more resentful person that, that creates more hostility. So once they are out in society again, they're going to commit other crimes. You don't know. I mean,
No, sterilization mellows people out.
you think? Well, yeah, in some cases, sure.
Not me,
But
I'm
I'm
not mellow.
Too much information for me there.
But I'm just saying. I mean, I think that this could be something that could definitely help out. Listen, there's another article here. North Carolina Department of Administration. This is their website. Let's see. North Carolina Justice for Sterilization Victims Foundation. From 1929 until 1974, an estimated 7,600 North Carolinians, women and men, many of whom were poor, undereducated, institutionalized, sick or disabled, were sterilized by choice, force, or coercion, I can't talk, under the authorization of the North Carolina Eugenics Board program. Governor Bev Perdue established the NC Justice for Sterilization Victims Foundation in 2010 to provide justice and compensate victims who were forcibly sterilized by the state of North Carolina. So this is something that was set up to change this. So, I mean, forced sterilization is something that has been done in law enforcement. It has been done.
But we don't do that at all right now, right? Because I think you said in that
I don't
Supreme
know.
Court case that was.
Well, there's people arguing that, but I think that I don't know if it's actually legal to do that now. I mean, I really
think it is.
It is legal to.
No, I think it's illegal. I mean, I don't know.
It may
I don't
be
know.
illegal. I don't know. I've got one. Let's see. This one's actually a little bit closer. Actually, I had one that was recent. Where'd it go?
Okay, so you would be totally against castration then?
Castration. I mean, removal of nucsacarage or whatever you call it. For repeat offender sex crime.
Sure. Let's say for child molesters, repeat offenders.
For child molesters.
Yeah, you think castration is reasonable
For men or women? Because for men, no, I'm not opposed to that.
Not opposed to it. Okay.
No, I'm not opposed to that. I mean, if you're a child molester, repeat offender, sure, absolutely remove it. Be done.
Okay.
I'm not opposed to that. Now, one counter that I would throw up there to you is I've read before that most child molesters are women.
What?
Yeah. It turns out the vast majority of child molesters to be women because
I have
think
a hard
about
time
women
accepting
tend to
that,
work
but okay.
around children a lot and they have more opportunity.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, that's news to me.
Well, you can Google it.
All right.
And you can look it up, but I have before, and it turns out that, women tend to be a little bit more active there. So what would you do under those circumstances? Castration?
No.
You still for that?
No.
Because, the prior show we talked about female
Right. Yeah.
mutilation.
Yes.
So,
Right.
I mean.
No, I'm not for that at all.
But you're okay if it's a guy.
I'm not for that either.
You're not for a guy?
I am not for the taxpayers paying for these kinds of
Taxpayers,
operations.
come on. I mean, look what we're paying for now, man.
Right.
I mean, seriously. I mean, seriously? I mean, we can't get a little bit more proactive here? in our
Right.
approach
Okay.
to
Well,
dealing with
look,
some of this stuff?
sex crimes are not crimes of sex. They are crimes of violence. Right.
Well, in terms of rape,
Right.
or something along those lines, I
Right.
mean, it's all about asserting
molestation.
control.
That's violence. That's dominance. That's not.
Yeah, you're establishing some sort
Right.
of dominance.
So I still think that somebody is still going to have those violent tendencies. regardless of what you do to them. All right, yeah,
Because
they're not
it's a
going to have the
mental- it's a
sexual
mental
arousal,
thing.
but they can still...
Because it's a mental thing.
Right.
Right. So let's stop the gene pool. Maybe there'll be less of these suckers running around.
But they're not going to be reproducing if they are taken out of society, if they're in prison.
But they're not taken out of society forever, bro. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
I mean, these people, I mean, they get these terms. If they have good behavior while in prison, I mean, they get out and they do the same crap. It just keeps... See, this is what I'm saying. We need somebody in law enforcement to sit here and give us a skinny on this stuff. I mean, I really want somebody who's going to frickin' knows the score and has put some of these guys away and actually can sit here and say, hey, this is what works, this is what doesn't. Because right now we're just throwing darts at a dartboard in the dark. And that's the frustrating thing.
Yeah.
But these officers, these people who work in law enforcement, the ones in the trenches, they apparently have been castrated because they refuse to be on the show. I mean, complete and total wusses. It's like, hide your name. Don't bring up. Just say you work in law enforcement. Give me some goods. We can even disguise your voice. You can talk through one of those xylophone things or whatever.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
So I don't know. I got one more thing. They actually have got a website called the Justice for Sterilization Victims Project. And it's actual website online, and it's 100% devoted to this topic. It says U.S. Supreme Court legitimized forced sterilization in 1927. 65,000 plus Americans in 33 states. Fighting for Justice. The Justice for Sterilization Victims Project is a national cooperative of leading legal scholars and public policy experts, a think tank whose collective mission is to bring justice to victims of forced sterilization. Forced sterilization is still held to be constitutional by the United States Supreme Court. And it cites Buck versus Bell, 1927, and we seek to change this. Most of the victims have been forgotten and neglected by their states. These victims hold on to hope to be acknowledged and compensated. So this is a group that is basically advocating against the practice of sterilization because it has been done in the past. And people who have been sterilized under law for whatever reason, they're looking to get compensated. Let's see here. Forced sterilization became legal in the United States in 1927 when the Supreme Court upheld a statute instituting compulsory sterilization of the unfit and feeble-minded, including the mentally retarded, for the protection and health of the state. Yeah, including James Harper. So, the bottom line is, okay, this concept is not a new concept. It has been done in the past. But I think the thing that a lot of people get confused here is it's like, I'm not talking about sterilization from a eugenetic standpoint that we should take, mentally handicapped or a certain type of person. And this is what I'm talking about, people who have crimes and they've done it on a repeated basis. A very specific use of sterilization.
Okay. And I'd still have to say that I disagree because, well, I guess it depends on the circumstances, but when it comes to violent crimes, it's not going to make the perpetrator any less violent.
No, and we can use all sorts of different rehabilitation stuff that we've already done for that. I'm talking about future stuff, future down the road. We're going to stop their genetics from going on further, and we're going to take away their ability to keep punching out kids or keep having kids. I think that needs to go away. Where are we at? No time.
We got
9 minutes. I want to do the Tarbosh segment because it's been the last few shows we haven't been able to do the Tarbosh segment, and that's a little bit disappointing because it's actually Tarbosh segment of the show. And this is one that I'd had a few shows back, didn't actually get through it, but I think you'll agree with me here, and we can talk a little bit about this.
Probably not.
You should agree with me on this one. Okay, if you don't, you suffer from a mental disorder, and you need to be sterilized. Okay, Tarbosh segment of the show. This is the start of a new year. The start of New Year's means an opportunity for a fresh start or a new beginning. Not necessarily on paper, such as in your checkbook, job history, etc., but a new beginning for you in your mind. In order for things to change in your checkbook or at work or that you've been actively pursuing the change that you want. It needs to become a focus throughout the year. So I'm encouraging you to recognize the opportunity that you have with the start of this year by sitting down and writing out exactly what you want from this year. And I mean, be specific. You want a new car? Write down the details of that car. The color, the seats, the door trim, etc. You want a new relationship? Be specific down to how often you want to have sex. Be specific in what you want. And as if you're going to get it exactly how you wanted. Now, once you're done writing them down, put them up in a place where you can reread them and spend the next year working on how you can make them happen. And that's the Tarbosh segment of the show. Bottom line is, this is the reason why I want to do this, because this Tarbosh segment, there's a lot of people who have heard the, gee, write it down, put it up thing.
Yeah, I totally agree with it.
Yeah.
Amazing.
See, I told you.
Yeah, okay.
You just saved your nut sacks.
No, stop
That's
it.
amazing. Okay, but the people totally agree with that. I knew you'd agree with that. But the bottom line is,
well, I agree
don't
with that
take it
because you create
seriously.
your own world through your thoughts. I mean,
People
that's
don't
been
take it seriously.
my
Whoa,
mantra.
whoa, whoa! You create your own world through your thoughts,
Yes,
and how you think comes out in what you say.
not necessarily, but
You know where I was going with that, and you caught me. Exactly.
Finish your point.
You don't think that segregation in your brain and talk it with your mouth. Okay. My point is, people don't take that seriously enough. The writing it down, posting it up, reading about it, thinking about it, making it part of your conscious effort to work towards those things. They don't take it seriously. So somebody says, write it down, put it up. They're like, yeah, whatever. That doesn't work.
you're right.
It doesn't work because
You have to believe it.
the people who did it aren't working. In order, I mean, sure, you're going to write something down, put it up. For instance, we have the little sign up there, Simple Radio, and it's got the number. It's up there for us to read and say, but we never read and say it. Okay?
I read and say it.
I do occasionally. I mean, the point is the goals work the same way. So it's not just specifically in terms of, if people hear it in terms of goals, they say, well, write your goals. I'm not talking about just specifically goals. I'm talking about circumstances and situations in your life.
You have to see it with the
change,
end result in mind.
that
Right.
you want change.
Yes.
And I mean, it can be relationship driven. It can be financially driven. It can be whatever. Things that you want changed. You're going to make a conscious effort. You're going to post that up, and you're going to read it on
You
a
have to
weekly
feel
basis.
it as though it has already manifested.
Yeah, you've got to actually form it in your brain, and this is what I want, and then actively pursue it. And the reason why is if it's in the forefront of your mind when you're out and about doing whatever you're doing, you're going to be thinking along those lines.
Yes.
And the little things that you may have missed before, you might pick up on
Right.
to help you get closer to that.
Mm-hmm.
So see, I knew you would agree.
Yeah, of
I knew
course.
you'd totally agree with me.
Absolutely.
So anyway, we've got probably 5 of the hour. Got anything else you want to cover?
Not really.
Not really.
No.
Well, gee, that's helpful there.
So sorry.
The bottom line is the sterilization thing. We need an officer.
Mm-hmm.
We need somebody to come in
Yeah.
and give us the heads up.
I still don't think that the sterilization thing does a whole lot of good, when it comes to violent crime.
You're beating a dead horse, though, because like I said, I mean, unless you can be more specific about the crimes we're talking about.
Well, I was talking like, for example, molestation. Now, when you first brought this topic up to me, now the way that I heard it is basically repeat offenders of people of violent sex crimes, they should be castrated.
No, if it's got to do with kids and the kids that in circumstances, situations, I don't even care if it's domestic violence. If it's abuse to kids, if people are being abusive to kids, then I think that part of the judgment needs to be sterilization. It needs to be introduced. People have multiple
That
kids.
still doesn't deter
They're
their
not taking
violent
care.
tendency.
I'm not saying it's gonna, man. I'm not.
You're just saying it's going to keep them from reproducing and continuing
Yeah.
the disease.
Yeah. I mean, why continue down that path? I mean, there's some
But
people
do
that
we have
simply-
any evidence that
they haven't earned the right to be listen, if you have your kids taken away, if you've done multiple things and the kids are eventually taken away, and I mean there are clearly you have not earned the right to be a parent.
But do we have any evidence that these children that have been produced by these monsters, and they've been raised in foster care, for example, and so they've never had the exposure of being around that perpetrator, that continue that same pattern of destruction?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't have
that's
I don't have
what I'd like to
information.
find out.
I mean, that would be an interesting theory. I mean, but yeah, I don't know.
Because if they, if they've grown up in a proper home and with good moral values and what have you, then and they're not continuing that, then doesn't that kind of take away from the whole argument of sterilization in the first place? Other than we don't want those
genetically, it would.
Yeah.
Genetically would. But I'm simply saying that even from the standpoint, if a woman has 3 kids and she has abused those 3 kids, and those kids are taken away, the government has come in and taken away those kids, then we don't really want her. I mean, regardless of the judgment and stuff that's taken place, we don't really want her reproducing. We don't want her to have another kid. I mean, her ability to be a parent, wasn't there with the first 3. It's not just going to magically appear on the 4th or 5th or 6th.
Right.
So I think that under those circumstances, judges are right. If, like this judge is like, hey, you're going to sit there, you got 4 kids. Where was it? 4 kids that you're molesting. And, you don't need to have a 5th.
All right.
I mean, the state's just going to take them away anyway.
So in the minute that we have left, how can people contact you and sponsor the show?
Go to buycommonsense.com, BUYCOMMONSENSE.com. Click on the link to the show and check out the sponsorship section of the site. I'm actually going to be revising that, changing that a little bit, make it a little bit more user-friendly. And I've got some partnership stuff that I'm going to be putting together on that. So, yeah, thanks for listening. Tune in next week, same day, same time. Thanks, folks.
Thanks a lot. Catch you next week.